Thank you, LaSharn. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Bianca Gomez, Senior Financial Innovation Counsel for LabCFTC. Welcome to the first panel of today, Meeting the Digital Demand Through Regulation. Regulators have to be proactive and forward-thinking to meet the demands of the market, address emerging technologies, and challenges caused by current events. For these and other reasons, regulators have been taking new approaches to oversight. Today, we have three panelists who are going to discuss some of their organization's innovation initiatives, share insight about their upcoming agendas, and discuss some regulatory issues in technology and innovation. Right now, we have Kavita Jain, Deputy Associate Director of Innovation Policy at the Federal Reserve Board, Matt Williams, Managing Director of Technology, Strategy, and Innovation at the National Futures Association. And due to technical difficulties, she's not with us right now, but we hope she'll be joining us soon. We have Laura Navaratnam, Interim Head of Department for Innovate at the Financial Conduct Authority of the United Kingdom. So we have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. So Kavita, we're going to start with you. The Federal Reserve has been very focused on a number of innovation initiatives, one of which relates to central bank digital currencies or stablecoins, and another relating to artificial intelligence. Can you share a little on what you're working on here?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you, Bianca, and thank you to LabCFTC for giving me the opportunity to participate on this panel today. First, I'm just going to give the standard disclaimer. I'm speaking here today in my personal capacity, and the views that I express are of my own and not of the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is committed to facilitating responsible innovation while ensuring the safety and soundness of the financial system and protection of consumers. Bianca, as you mentioned, we have several innovation-related initiatives underway, not just at the board, but across the Federal Reserve System. I am with the Office of Innovation Policy, and my office works closely with my colleagues in other divisions, including our Payments Division and the Consumer and Community Affairs Division. And as you mentioned, we have several initiatives underway. One of them relates to CBDCs. With respect to CBDCs or central bank digital currencies, we have efforts underway to better understand the potential risks and benefits of payments-related technologies, such as blockchain. We're looking at CBDC from a variety of different angles, really just to understand its benefits and risks. And I will categorize these efforts really in three main areas. The first one is experimentation with the technology itself. The second one involves engagement and collaboration with key stakeholders. And then the third one is really conducting further economic research. So let me talk a little bit about the experimentation with the technology. We're trying to better understand the technological capabilities and limitations of the different types of technologies around blockchain and platforms to manage and transfer CBDCs. The Federal Reserve System is conducting research and experiments through two primary groups. The first one is the Tech Lab at the Federal Reserve Board itself. The Tech Lab is a virtual team that is made up of a cross-section of staff from the board as well as from reserve banks. And this team researches and analyzes the new technologies that are relevant to not just digital currencies, but other payment and clearing and settlement systems. The second project is called Project Hamilton, which is led by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. And under this project, the Boston Bank has entered into a joint research effort with researchers at MIT. And the idea there is to jointly build and test a hypothetical central bank digital currency. The goal is to better understand if and how a blockchain-based tech platform can meet the needs of a theoretical general-purpose CBDC. And so the second prong, as I mentioned earlier, is around stakeholder engagement. And this involves engaging with government, with academia, with private sector entities, to learn about the various use cases that are being explored, the range of options, what are their considerations, etc. And then we're also collaborating with other central banks, such as through the group of central banks that are looking at CBDC under the leadership of BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. And finally, as I mentioned, we're conducting further research and policy analysis to better understand economic and policy implications of the CBDC. Just to be clear, we're simply experimenting with the technology to better understand it. The Federal Reserve System would not issue a CBDC without going through an extensive policy process, including deliberations and engagement with other parts of the federal government and a broad set of other stakeholders. You also mentioned stablecoins. So the Federal Reserve does not have plenary authority over payment systems. So as such, we do not regulate stablecoins. However, we follow them from a financial stability perspective and to monitor risks that stablecoins may pose to banks that are involved in related activities. We've also been working in coordination with other regulators, again, both U.S. as well as international regulators, just to think through these issues and the benefits and risks stablecoins may pose. I should also mention that the FSB, the Financial Stability Board, recently published a report on the regulation and supervision of global stablecoins, and staff from the Federal Reserve Board played an integral role in the development of that report. And then let me just briefly touch upon artificial intelligence, which is another technology that is gaining a lot of traction in the financial services industry. Many of us are aware AI is now being explored in a variety of different ways in the banking, or I should say broadly the financial services industry, including areas like credit underwriting, financial crime monitoring, customer service, fraud prevention, etc. And like with many emerging technologies, this technology offers a lot of benefits, but it also poses risks. And many of these risks are not necessarily new risks, but they're just manifested differently. Particularly two risks that are garnering attention around AI are those related to model opacity and those related to just heavy use of data and potential concerns around biases in data, risk of data poisoning, etc. So we are now in the process of trying to better understand how banks are managing these risks and whether there is additional opportunity for clarity or guidance that the industry could benefit from. So I'll pause with that and pass it back on to you, Bianca.
Those are some very exciting initiatives, and I can't wait to hear more about them in the future. So I am happy to report that we have Laura on audio, but unfortunately it does not. We won't be able to see her. Laura, are you on the line?
Hi, Bianca. Hopefully you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. Welcome. So again, I already introduced her, but we have Laura Navaratnam. She's the interim head of department for Innovate at the Financial Conduct Authority of the United Kingdom. And one thing that we have learned in 2020 is to power through technology issues. So welcome.
Thank you.
And so I'm sorry that we can't see you, but so I'm going to just jump right in and give you the next question. And so one of the things we've seen with the pandemic is the impact it has on industry participants, whether it's challenges for startups that are having issues moving to the next level, or advantages as more people turn to technology in their everyday lives. I know FCA launched many initiatives during the pandemic to both help in these areas and elevate technology and innovation. Can you provide an overview of them and give some behind-the-scenes insight into how and why you launched these initiatives? What have you seen in particular in your Sandbox initiative?
Great, thank you, Bianca, and apologies again for the technology fail. I'm sure we can't have a digital conference without something digital going wrong. But
if you did.
So as you said, during the pandemic, we have launched a couple of sandbox-related initiatives. So firstly, we have launched Cohort 7 of our regulatory sandbox. So for those that aren't familiar with this concept, our Reg Sandbox is a space for firms to test innovative propositions in the market with real consumers who are protected through bespoke safeguards. We expect sandbox tests to have a clear objective, be focused on genuine innovations and bring about consumer benefits. We've supported around 140 firms in the first 6 cohorts of the sandbox that's been running for a couple of years now. So Cohort 7 opened on the 5th of October, and authorised and unauthorised firms, as well as technology businesses that are looking to deliver innovation in the UK financial services market are eligible to apply. For this cohort in particular, we are particularly interested in firms who want to help people and the financial systems that they rely on to deal with the effects of the coronavirus outbreak. However, the sandbox is still open to all types of propositions, and we definitely welcome applications from all sectors of the financial services market. These propositions need to be genuinely innovative and show a clear consumer benefit. So the application window for the Reg Sandbox is open until the 31st of December. I have actually just seen a camera option come up on my screen, so maybe, can you see me now?
Yay! Yes, we can.
Yeah, excellent. There we go. Overcome the final hurdle. Wonderful, wonderful. It's so much nicer to be able to speak in virtual person. So yes, that's a little bit about our Cohort 7. We've also launched an initiative called the Digital Sandbox. So this initiative really builds on our overall approach to innovation. We've been collaborating with the City of London Corporation on this Digital Sandbox pilot. So our experiences and engagement with the industry have really indicated that developing a permanent digital testing environment would provide really significant value to financial services, particularly at this time. So the Digital Sandbox pilot is really aimed at trialling this environment by providing support to products and services which are at a very early stage of development. So I would say sort of earlier than they might enter into the regulatory sandbox. The pilot cohort opened as well on the 5th of October, and we are, again, supporting firms that are looking to develop solutions to the COVID-19 challenges. We designed the Digital Sandbox to offer participants an integrated development environment and collaboration platform with the objective of really facilitating diversity of thinking, sharing learnings and fostering an ecosystem around solving industry-wide challenges. So we've created a high-quality data sets, including synthetic or anonymized data sets to enable testing and validation of technology solutions by the firms that will be successful. We've identified 3 key areas of importance for us in the pilot. The first is around preventing fraud and scams. The second is around supporting the financial resilience of vulnerable consumers. And the third is around improving access to finance for small and medium-sized enterprises. So that pilot is underway at the moment. We are currently reviewing applications, and we hope to be working with successful firms in the new year. Thank you, Bianca. Back to you.
Great, thank you. And it is great to see you. So the next question is for Matt. NFA is a core partner to us here at the CFTC and to market participants. I know you've been focused on the technology side of NFA. Can you share some of your agenda?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Bianca. But first off, I want to thank you kindly for having me today. And thanks to Melissa and the LabCFTC team for organizing such a cool event. So NFA, so we have a multitude of technology projects in flight right now, and I'd be happy to share some of the highlights. The first topic that I'll share on our agenda is the formation of a new data team. So this summer, NFA formed a centralized data science and analytics team as a mechanism to further our data analytics efforts across the organization. While we made a lot of strides in data analytics over the recent years, the focus of this newly created team is on modernizing our data analytics infrastructure, building data visualizations, and scaling the application of data science across the organization. This team is really tasked with identifying use cases where data science, machine learning, and visualizations can create efficiencies or solve problems. And also a big part of this is modernizing our data platform, which is another big part of our technology agenda. So for our data platform modernization approach, we're working on building a new data science and machine learning environment in the Azure cloud. This project essentially moves us from doing local machine learning model development to a more collaborative data science workspace using such things as Databricks and Azure machine learning services. So we currently, at NFA, we currently use machine learning to build risk models for classification purposes and also for some operational efficiencies, but we're looking to scale the application of this technology to many other use cases. And the first part of this modernization effort is going to be a POC where we build a new risk model in this cloud space. And there's also some other cool things that we get with this modernization approach. We get better access to tooling. We get quicker updates to packages and libraries, and ideally faster production deployment times. Another big ticket item that has presented a great opportunity for innovation at NFA revolves around the changing nature of our investigations. This is an area where NFA really recognized that we're in need of a solution to keep pace with technology advances that were happening in the industry. In particular, we're seeing more and more regulatory cases that involve unstructured data. And what I mean by that is data comes primarily in the form of communication records such as email, chat, and voice recordings. And we found we needed a better approach to handle these types of investigations. There's a technology field called e-discovery that really seeks to address these types of use cases, and that really refers to a process in which electronic data is procured with the intent of using it as evidence in a regulatory matter. So, NFA has been using e-discovery technology for a couple of years now as part of our investigations and examinations, but more recently we were taking advantage of recent innovations in this space. We're beginning to leverage advanced analytics such as predictive coding, which makes it easier to sample large amounts of documents to get to actionable insights quicker. We've also contracted with a new vendor for machine transcription of audio recordings and also the translation of foreign language documents. This new technology uses artificial intelligence to turn unstructured data into analytics, and it provides a much easier mechanism to identify the relevant information that we're looking for in these documents. The really cool thing about this technology is that it eliminates the need to manually listen to hours and hours of voice calls and instead really focus on those that might be of interest to us. This has the potential to save hundreds of hours of time for our staff. And is really a great example where innovation focuses on the reduction of manual and tedious processes for our exam teams and allows them to not only widen the breadth and depth of our exams, but focus on more higher value items. Another area I'd like to talk about is education, which is a big area of technology focus for us. To me, education is the cornerstone of innovation. In order to find the best solution to a problem, you really need to know what your tools are and how they work. And at NFA, we started an innovation education series where the goal is to demystify technologies such as AI and ML and identify use cases within our departments where these tools can be used to solve real problems. So to this end, we've brought in external vendors to showcase how their technologies are being used in the financial services space. We've also done internal tech talks to showcase current practical applications of these same technologies. And we're planning an education series that centers on trading technologies that are used by those that we regulate. So really, if we do all these pieces correctly, we'll not only have a good understanding of new technologies as they come into play, but also an understanding as to how our members are using this technology and how we can employ it ourselves to innovate upon our regulatory processes. And lastly, I'd like to talk a bit about our remote working technology. So like everyone else, NFA has been forced to evaluate how technology can enable our staff and members to be the most effective in a remote environment. But taking a step further, we decided to use this time to evaluate which technology will enable us to be equally effective in any environment in the future. So that could be in the office, at home, or on the road as we travel. Whether staff has wanted to or not, we've all grown familiar with a multitude of applications like Skype and Teams and Zoom and WebEx and Wova and Jabber and so on. But the question going forward is really, what's the right mix of software and hardware and functionality? So to answer this question, we put together cross-departmental working groups and that are tasked with researching collaboration technology. Do we need virtual whiteboards? What does our conference technology look like? Process efficiencies. We've identified that we'd like to improve our ticketing system internally. There's efficiencies in production deployment and a bunch of other areas of focus. So our goal with this endeavor is a bit of technology gap analysis with the goal of making recommendations to senior management as to how to fill those gaps. So Bianca, those are some of our highlights in our technology agenda. And turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. Education is the cornerstone of innovation. I really like that. I might have to steal that from Matt.
Welcome to have it.
Thank you. So my next few questions are for all of the panelists, but I'm going to start with you, Laura. As a regulator, what do you see as the biggest challenges in moving your innovation agenda forward?
Absolutely. So I've tried to just pick 5 because I think there's probably a lot of issues we could discuss here. So I think firstly, really, we are seeing a demand for our market innovation services outstripping supply, if I'm being honest. I think there's really an increasing number of fintech firms exporting globally from the UK. So the sector really needs to mature in a responsible and sustainable way. For example, newer firms need to recognise the need to come up the regulatory awareness curve faster in order to sort of support good consumer outcomes and sustainability. I think secondly, and this is one really for us as regulators, we all need to embrace digitization and modernization whilst continuing to perform our important regulatory roles. Thirdly, and I think others have picked up on this already, I envisage that skills, knowledge and expertise will only become increasingly important when we look to the use of technologies like AI, ML, and these become more widespread. And we're all searching for talent in an increasingly competitive and global market. So I really think there's a question about the sufficiency of digital, machine learning, data engineering, business change, talent in the market more generally. Fourthly, and I think the CFTC actually does this really well, and I love being part of these panels. However, the broader market does suffer from a lack of diversity. I think the finance, technology, and fintech industries do have a real underrepresentation from certain groups. And I think we know that diversity really helps to mitigate the risks of things like groupthink, provides an opportunity for competitive advantage to organizations by helping them to make better decisions and to think in the long term. So I think pulling together diverse teams, it does take a significant conscious effort and a willingness for us all to change our ways of working and aspects of our culture. So I think that's a real barrier. Finally, I think all regulators are, to varying degrees, seeking to pursue, pretty ambitious innovation and transformation strategies in the years ahead. There is a really high need for us to experiment and share our learnings and iterate. So it does require some tolerance for failure and recognition of the value of learning through doing. And I think as a culture of a regulator, that can be challenging. So those are the 5 that I've picked out, Bianca.
Those are a great 5, and not just because we got a lovely plug from you, so thank you. So next, Kavita, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Laura encapsulated it really, really well. The only other thing I would add is just the rapid pace at which technologies evolved over the past decade and how it continues to evolve, and that poses a challenge related to the timing of the regulatory response and the specificity of the response. So what I mean by that is, as regulators, we don't want to jump in too early when we start seeing adoption of the technology. So we don't want to jump in too early with new rules or policies and not really give the industry a chance to try out the technology and risk stifling innovation. And yet, I feel like we can't wait too long sometimes to take action if the use of the new technology or related business model poses some unique risks. And then also we have to aim to establish a framework that can be adopted as the technology evolves. So the key is to take a principles-based approach to regulation and not to be too prescriptive. I think ultimately it's about striking a balance, right? So on the one hand, we want to avoid taking a position that is based on the current state of technology, but at the same time, we want to provide enough details to give the firms a sense of the rules of the road.
Those are a lot of great points, as well as the principles-based approach, which we also follow here at the CFTC. So next, Matt, do you have any thoughts to add?
I do. Since Laura had 5, I don't feel so bad with my 3, so I'll try and be brief. I would say the 3 biggest challenges that I thought of were cybersecurity, again with education, and then really keeping pace with business needs. So, as far as cybersecurity goes, the answer is a bit twofold. Firstly, it's worth noting that while we're talking about innovation in the regulatory space, innovation also occurs in the criminal space. And as regulators, we deal with very highly sensitive data. And it really goes without saying that it's the utmost importance that we keep our environments and data secure. But this requires constant attention and response from our security teams. And as such, a lot of time and resources go into maintaining our security posture. That said, our security posture can also create challenges in our other innovation efforts. There's really a lot of boxes that need to be checked for our security evaluations. And as innovation is really a function that's dedicated to testing and building new things, this can be somewhat difficult to navigate. So it becomes very important to be able to find that balance that allows you to be both secure and innovative at the same time. And I believe this can be achieved through a combination of process efficiencies, transparency and education around our internal policies, but most importantly, having a good collaborative environment to overcome these challenges as a team. And then I'll go back to education again. This can be somewhat of a challenge, albeit a good one. You don't necessarily need to have an advanced computer science degree or a data science degree to understand how technology can make you more effective. This is where education comes into play. So giving those that don't have technology backgrounds, a high-level education of new technology can be extremely effective in identifying areas that are ripe for innovation. And is really a key first step in our process. So for that reason, we're currently devoting a lot of time towards technology education and awareness around our organization. And the last piece I'll mention is the bit about keeping pace with new business needs. I believe it was Melissa who made a comment in a previous Empower Innovation panel. It said something to the effect that over the last 5 years, innovation agendas have become core to regulatory organizations. And I believe this to be true. And this is probably born out of a need to maintain pace with rapidly changing environments, but it also comes with rapidly growing scope and requirements. I mentioned we formed a centralized data science and analytics team, and our first remit of that team was to interview various departments at NFA and kind of unearth the existing problems that they're facing. But what we didn't expect was that our backlog would grow exponentially before we even started work. I suppose people are never really shy about telling you how you can help them. So therefore, keeping pace with the business needs for innovation poses an interesting challenge for us. And like I said, it's a fun problem to have, though.
Thank you, Matt. So we're going to stick with you to start off the next question. Regulatory coordination is so important as technology doesn't see borders. Can you share how you coordinate with other regulators on these initiatives?
Yeah, absolutely. So as part of our innovation efforts, we're always engaging with our regulatory network to do knowledge shares and really look for collaborative opportunities. Early this year, we had a nice learning session with FINRA around our cloud migration. We've recently talked with AMF France and AMF Quebec around data modernization. And we have a session planned in the coming weeks with the Australian Securities and Investment Commission around data analytics and market supervision. I've also had some conversations with Melissa around the potential to collaborate with LabCFTC around our innovation education series. You can really learn a lot from your peers, and I've yet to see an example where it wasn't worth the time to knowledge share with other regulators. In fact, if there's anyone watching this panel that has ideas on how to collaborate or exchange ideas, I would encourage you to reach out to me.
Okay, great. And Kavita, what about you?
Yeah, I'll echo what Matt said. I think collaborating with other regulators, both domestically and internationally, is really critical. Domestically, I meet my counterparts at the other agencies regularly. I know, Bianca, we talk often. We have this little lunch club with the innovation leads of the different agencies that Melissa coordinates, where we meet regularly to compare notes on our fintech, on fintech developments that we're seeing in the industry. We talk about our innovation priorities. We identify common topics sometimes so we can strive to work on them together on an interagency basis. For example, I mentioned our work on AI earlier and trying to better understand how the industry is using the technology. We've been conducting industry outreach on AI in coordination with the other agencies and also the CFTC. Similarly, internationally, we engage with various standard-setting bodies such as the FSB and BCBS, or the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, on a number of fintech-related initiatives. I mentioned earlier our involvement in the stablecoins report that was published by FSB. The board staff also contributed towards the report on SupTech and RegTech that was also published by the FSB just last month. We're also members of GFIN, the Global Financial Innovation Network, that I'm sure Laura will touch upon. And then we just hold bilateral conversations with domestic and international regulators as needed, sometimes to talk about specific topics and sometimes just to, share kind of what are top topics on our innovation agenda.
Okay, great. And now, Laura?
Yep, absolutely. And Kavita, thank you for that wonderful segue into GFIN, which I am indeed going to talk about. So for those that aren't familiar, our Global Financial Innovation Network is chaired by the FCA and now has over 60 international regulators involved, who are all committed to supporting financial innovation in the interest of consumers. We officially launched the network in January last year, 2019, and it really has three primary functions. So firstly, to act as a network of regulators to collaborate and share experiences of innovation in their respective markets, to provide a forum for joint RegTech and SupTech work and collaborative knowledge sharing and lessons learned, and thirdly, to provide firms with an environment in which to trial cross-border solutions. So these work streams are a really core component of the GFIN initiative, and a significant amount of work in respect of regulatory collaboration, knowledge sharing has really happened through them. So just picking up on that final point around cross-border testing, we actually launched on the 29th of October our first cross-border testing cohort. So we're currently inviting applications from firms to test innovative financial products, services, or business models, or regulatory net technology across more than one country or jurisdiction within the network. We currently have 23 regulators across 5 continents taking part in the cross-border initiative. And this cohort is really built on the valuable experience and feedback that we gained from doing a pilot in 2019, which has helped us to evolve our framework to better be able to support this cohort. So I think going forward, that's going to be a really positive way that regulators can engage, not just with each other, but with firms and supporting firms. One other area I'd like to touch on from the FCA perspective is what we've been doing in the field of technical assistance. So in January this year, we launched our first large-scale project delivering technical assistance with a focus on the use and regulation of fintech and regtech. This project was entirely funded by the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, the FCDO, to which we as the FCA were ultimately accountable. So through this project, we worked exclusively in Nigeria with the Central Bank of Nigeria over a 12-month project delivered virtually, or that wasn't the original intention, but it was ultimately delivered virtually due to the impacts of COVID. And this is the first time that the FCA has really done a technical assistance program like this and engaged with regulators in a different jurisdiction in this way. So we agreed a set of outcomes with both the FCDO and the Central Bank of Nigeria up front, with a particular focus on supporting innovation by inputting into how they were developing their own regulatory sandbox. I think the project has been a real success. We've provided several workshops and training sessions focused on launching a CBN payment sandbox, open banking, and the supervision of new technologies generally. It's also been incredibly helpful and insightful for us to forge those new links with other regulators within the Nigerian fintech ecosystem as well as firms, so we can better understand the challenges regulators face in other jurisdictions and see the new trends and innovations that are coming through. So I think that's quite a different way that we are looking to potentially engage with jurisdictions in the future.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So, Kavita, I'm going to start with you for the next question. What do you see as the biggest regulatory issues in technology and innovation you're going to tackle in 2021?
I think after 2020, on all the technology issues that we've tackled, it's hard to beat what will be bigger than that. But jokes aside, I think post-COVID, when we get there, I anticipate that we're going to see some significant changes in how financial services are offered. We've already seen significant acceleration in digitization in the banking service, in the banking industry, and I anticipate that once we're in this, post-pandemic, the industry is going to take a step back and think about how to make changes in how services are offered and in response to consumer behavior. So I think just the unknown of what the world may look like post-COVID is going to be an interesting issue. And then the other thing that I would mention, we've talked a little bit about stablecoins and blockchain and artificial intelligence. But as smaller financial institutions, smaller banks look to innovate, we're going to see greater partnership with third parties where banks may be partnering with a fintech firm to leverage technologies that fintech firm may offer, or where banks may become service providers and work with a fintech company where the fintech is on the front end and interacting directly with consumers. So managing those third-party relationships and the risks that those relationships may pose is an area that I think will continue to be one to monitor and manage.
Okay, and Matt, what about you? Looking ahead to 2021.
Yeah, I think 2021 will just be a bit of a continuation of some of our current efforts. So, I spoke a bit about our data modernization efforts. I think it's worth noting that sometimes innovation isn't always fun. It has to be facilitated by completing the not so fun tasks like standardizing your data, reevaluating deployment processes, building new environments, either be it for sandbox or proof of concepts. So, a lot of that we've identified as areas of need, and we'll probably be continuing to do that through, the first half of 2021. One of the things that we really like to do, and, I'd like to get a chance to talk to Kavita about how they approach this, is a tech lab function within NFA. It's an area that we decided we'd like to focus on. We'd like to test some practical application of new technologies, but in a sandbox environment, not tied to production. I think it's a critical part of innovation is devoting, percentage of your time to trying new things and seeing if they're viable for your problems. So that's an area of focus. We've also just scratched the surface really on the regulatory application of artificial intelligence and machine learning. We spent a lot of the last couple of months trying to unearth other areas within NFA where these can be applied to problems. And as I said, we built quite a lengthy backlog, so it will really just be ticking away at that backlog. There's some other areas of technology that we'd like to explore. Natural language processing, NLP is an area that we're keen to start exploring. Deep learning, it's a bit of a nascent technology for us, but it's something we plan to explore as well. And we've recently identified a use case where chatbots might help us operationally. I think one other area that I'd like to talk about where, could be a challenge in 2021 is, this concept of increasing volumes and, the different types of data that we're getting from our member base. I touched a bit earlier on the unstructured data that we have to deal with, and that's growing in terms of voice and chats. There's also real-time data. A lot of this was the impetus behind us, accelerating our cloud migration. And so this is a challenge that we look forward to tackling in 2021 as well.
And what about you, Laura?
Yeah, I definitely agree with the comments around having to see how the kind of current climate starts to play out, both from a sort of market economic perspective, to really understand how fintech firms are faring in this crisis and what the impact on long-term investment, for example, will be. I also think there is a natural tail in consumer behaviours. So it does take a little bit of time for consumers to change how they're interacting with financial services, and actually the things that we're seeing now might not be the big end impacts in terms of where we end up. So I think that's something we really need to pay quite close attention to. In addition to sort of the AI and data piece that Matt mentioned, crypto assets is another a big area that we will be continuing to look at in 2021, as I know many other regulators around the world are. So our policy team continues to work very closely with our UK Treasury and the Bank of England as part of a UK crypto assets task force, as well as work that we're doing independently. We are engaging very actively with other regulators and international bodies like IOSCO and FSB. I think crypto assets really poses various risks for consumers who can be at risk of suffering losses without regulatory protection. As part of the task force work, our UK Treasury has committed to consulting on the UK's broader regulatory approach to crypto assets, specifically around stablecoins by the end of this year. And I think stablecoins have been a particular area of focus for us. And I think will continue to be so as the Treasury looks to the questions around the regulatory perimeter. In addition to that, the UK Treasury has also recently consulted on changes to our financial promotions order, which essentially regulates the marketing and associated promotions of crypto asset products. So that consultation has closed. So obviously our Treasury will be considering next steps regarding that. But there will also be a piece of work that we at the FCA need to consider in the new year around that as well. I think the other area, which I think will be only increasing in importance given COVID, is around digital ID. So we have observed, some really key proven benefits and challenges through our sandbox environment for both consumers and financial institutions, including sort of faster consumer identity verification, enhanced privacy protection, and reuse of pre-verified digital IDs. But I think there are some real challenges with the use of digital ID. And I think although social attitudes are certainly changing in the UK and I think around the world, meaning that consumers are becoming more willing to adopt new apps and technologies, there is still a lack of trust around providing personal information, especially when consumers are interacting with a brand or a service that they don't know compared to some of the larger incumbents. I think there's also a lack of awareness around the concept of portable identity and its capabilities, as well as a lack of understanding on the technicalities of how the data is actually stored. I think the customer journey resulting from the kind of multiple steps and services that a user may be required to go through in order to sign up and be onboarded actually might be very complex and burdensome. So that's another area that we will continue to focus on in the new year.
Thank you. And so for the next question, I'm going to start with Matt. What recommendations do you have to those in industry about working with regulators? And this is actually a good tie-in to one of the questions we've received from the audience, which is, what are some ways innovators and fintech can prepare to meet or speak with regulators? What are some best practices in coming to the table?
Yeah, great question. I'd really say, constructive engagement is super important. Much like understanding our own internal problems is the first step in innovation at NFA, the same can be said about those we regulate. I really think collaboration is essential in understanding how we can provide better services. At NFA, we recognize that the exams and investigations we conduct can be an expenditure of resources for our members. So therefore, it's really important to understand how we can make those exams and investigations more efficient, through innovation. And this is very important to us. We've already, in the past, we've always, begun our innovations to that end. I think continued engagement with our members is always going to be a core part of our agenda. And, as I said before, I think unearthing the problem is the first step in the areas where you can innovate. So I think just, constant engagement and constructive engagement with our members is really how we get to that point. So, when you're asking what's the best way to engage with NFA, it's just really reaching out to us, having an open and honest discussion about, where improvement could be manifested.
And Kavita, what about you?
Yeah, I like that term, constructive engagement. I totally agree with that. I would say, for those who are interested in talking to regulators, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Reach out to us early. Reach out to us often. Don't wait until your product is or, your business model is fully baked and then come in and ask us for information. We're not obviously in a position to give policy or legal counsel to industry participants, but we are very willing to pull in colleagues from across the division to share kind of our thoughts, to refer you all to existing guidance or resources that may be out there. We at the Federal Reserve have hosted innovation office hours this year in partnership with the Reserve Banks. They were intended to be regional. We hosted the first one in partnership with the Atlanta Reserve Bank. But in this COVID environment, we pivoted quickly to hosting virtual office hours. In fact, we have one going on this week. So we invite industry participants, not just our supervised institutions or banks, but even fintechs, to come in and talk to us, share kind of, new ideas or questions that they may have. We've met with industry participants through office hours on a broad range of topics, from AI to digital assets to cloud computing to reg tech to data aggregation. And really these office hours, if I may say, serve as two-way learning opportunities where we can provide information to industry participants, but we also learn, with respect to what's on top of mind, what are leading technologies, how they're being used, what are some issues or areas of concern that industry participants may have. I would also advise or suggest that, if you're interested in reaching out to us outside of these office hours, we routinely hold bilateral meetings. You can feel free to reach out directly to me or go to our website, the Federal Reserve Board's website, and click on the innovation page. And there's a form that you can fill out with any specific or general areas that you may want to talk to us about, and we will respond back and set up a meeting with you all. So, like I said, reach out to us early, reach out to us often, do not hesitate.
And what about you, Laura?
Yeah, so definitely agree with that. Reach out early, reach out often. At the FCA, we have a number of different ways of supporting, whether it's through our sandbox, our direct support function, our advice unit function. So really, there's no excuse. So we definitely want to hear. We want to hear from firms. But I think to sort of slightly temper that message, I guess, is for firms to really understand that, we do have competing pressures and priorities. The innovation division at the FCA is around 100 people, which sounds big, but when you play that against the 60,000 firms that we regulate, you see the size of the challenge. So firms that can come in and understand that and the pressures that we are under as well. I think another thing for firms to think about is really treating compliance like a design principle up front. So as they're developing their product, really thinking about innovation and regulatory compliance up front, because I think it can actually affect product investment and future growth if it's not baked in at that really early stage. And I guess a related point, at the FCA, as with other agencies, we're really here to support the firm, understand its journey to market, to help establish positive conditions for innovation. But ultimately, we are not responsible for the firm's compliance with regulation. That has to be the responsibility of the firm. And ultimately, there is only so far that we can go. So, to take that back to the start, I think you can make that relationship a really positive one if you are able to engage early and frequently in the right way. Just accepting that there will be certain challenges, but we've certainly managed to do it successfully in a number of different arenas.
Thank you, Laura. And since we have a few minutes left, I'm going to throw the last question to you. Globally, many other regulators have looked at FCA and how you organize around innovation. I know this organization hasn't been overnight. Can you give an overview of your innovation division and what learnings you have about getting this set up?
Yeah, absolutely. Whilst I said we're currently around 100 people, we started out about 5-6 years ago with literally 2 or 3 people who were essentially providing a helpline service to fintechs in the market who needed regulatory support. And we've really built our function around that. So, the FCA has operational objectives to ensure effective competition in the interests of consumers, and that has really helped us grow our innovation unit through that sort of competition lens. So we now have 3 sort of core departments within the division. So we have the Innovate function, which combines our firm support services, so Sandbox, direct support and advice unit, with a policy and an international engagement function as well. We have our RegTech department, which supports developing RegTech technologies with initiatives like tech sprints and the Digital Sandbox, which I mentioned earlier. We also have our advanced analytics team, which leads the work to transform us as a regulator into a more data and analytical driven agency. So developing solutions to improve our effectiveness through the use of data. And finally, our third area is our central data services team, which is responsible for the FCA's delivery of the data strategy and developing subtext solutions. So I think part of our success has been to continually try and push boundaries and really work with the rest of our organisation and our market to understand the needs and where innovation can go. And one of the things we did last year was we actually tried to essentially analyse the effectiveness of our functions, particularly within Innovate, because we have the external firm-facing piece. So we published a report last April, which I think was fairly challenging because a lot of the impact that the Innovate services have can be quite subjective and can take quite a long time to realise. But pleasingly, we felt like the department gives firms regulatory certainty that they need to develop innovations and deliver them at speed. We found that actually overall it's improving outcomes for consumers because firms we support bring innovations to market, which is of benefit, but it also means incumbents respond by competing harder and improving their own offerings. We also found that overall it was helping encourage positive innovation both domestically and internationally. So I think it's certainly on the right track. But as I say, given the size of the UK market and the continuing pace of development, it always feels like we're running. But it has been a long journey, and I think initiatives like, as I spoke about earlier, GFIN that encourage us to really engage and collaborate with other regulators around the world will make sure that we can really tailor our offerings within the UK to a way that is relevant for UK participants and will have a positive impact on the market more globally as well.
Thank you, Laura. That's all the time we have for today. I hope you all enjoyed this panel as much as I did. Thank you to Kavika, Laura, and Matt. Up next, we have an exciting announcement from Brian Trackman about Project Streetlamp. Thank you again.